And welcome to what is sort of officially, unofficially, not even sort of. This is officially my first Sons Geek podcast. And I'm kind of putting that in quotations for all of the people who are watching along live on YouTube. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I've never really considered myself a podcast because really at the end of the day, I'm just like a content creator. I also put that into quotations for all the people who are watching. But as time has gone on, I've done more of these live shows and YouTube shorts and expanded my content. And I was having a conversation with one of my really good friends. Shout out to my good friend Tim if you are listening. I appreciate you. And we were just listening to this one random podcast, and then he mentioned to me, he's like, hey man, he's like, have you ever thought of putting your content or your shows on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever? And I've been asked that question before, and I appreciate anybody who's ever asked me that question before. Sorry if I forgot to mention you, but it was just sort of the timing and sort of the way that he asked it. And I was like, you know what? I was like, it is so long overdue. And that's an understatement. It is so long overdue to finally put these live shows and my content into podcast format. And that's why this, if you can see the bar for all the YouTube audience listening, that's why this is my first podcast ever. And like most podcasts, it's probably going to suck, but I will do my absolute best to just talk all things Phoenix Suns. And, again, it's an understatement why I never uploaded my content to podcast format. It's long overdue. It's finally being done. And it was really because I just procrastinated. I was lazy. And I sort of just took a little too much pride into these YouTube videos and live shows when in reality, I should have went back 5 years ago and just uploaded every single live show onto podcast format, no matter how many people were listening. So if you are ever considering starting a podcast, doesn't matter if it's NBA, Phoenix Suns, whatever you want to talk about, I encourage you to do it in podcast format as well. Definitely start on YouTube. That is the very first advice I will give anybody is if you want to make content, start on YouTube and just start and kind of learn as you go. But definitely do the podcast format. It definitely helps. Hey.0 asks the first question of this podcast. Did Voida tell you to do so? I'm sure he did. I'm sure in the past he has talked about it and has mentioned it to me. And it's funny that you mentioned John Voida from the Suns Jam Session podcast. Because I actually texted him. I said, hey man, I was like, when you were first getting started with your podcast, I was like, what website did you use? And I found a website called, I think it's Buzzspring. Let me make sure I'm getting that right. I'm new to all of this. Buzzsprout. I'm sorry. It's called Buzzsprout. And pretty much they let you upload your podcast for free. And you can put it onto Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I think if you upgrade, you can put it on more. That is the podcast story.
Oh my God, who the hell cares?
Much later.
For future podcast listeners, future viewers of the show, future audience, future fellow Suns Geeks, just remember, I know there's no excuses, play like a champion, but I am a one-man show here. I'm just sort of starting this quote podcast. And I do my best to try to get you guys as much videos and live shows as I can, but when the Suns are only winning 5 games, you know what I mean? 5 games since February, it's kind of hard to do that, but trust me, you guys, any breaking Phoenix Suns news, any serious rumors, speculation, all of that, I will do my best to cover it all. And I like the spontaneous podcast show. We got to do more of these. And shout out to Boyd from the Aussie Suns Fans podcast. We were supposed to do this call-in show, but because, Australia is 17 hours, if not more, away from the United States. scheduling conflicts happened. That was a busy week for me as well. We are going to do that. Maybe I'll do it one day. I'll just do a call-in show. It'll be like a call-in podcast. So just know that I'm working hard for you guys, and just know that I love you guys. And just please subscribe to the channel. Follow the podcast. It feels kind of cool to say that now. Like, follow the Sons Geek podcast. Follow the podcast. And just help support. Click like, smash the like button, share the show, tell your fellow Suns fans, tell your fellow friends, they're a fan of Valley Sports, tell your family, tell people about the channel, tell people about the podcast. I would really appreciate it.
What's up, Sons Geek?